Okay, gang. Welcome to the, you're in the right session. This is the right session to be in. This is the good one. E-commerce, come on, whatever. Make sure y'all tell Scott that a little bit later. Thanks for being here. Like we talked about earlier, we know we were kind of deep technically in the last session on workflow. Y'all in here were like going and going and going, so I know you wanted that. The goal of this session, as we mentioned again, was we want to get big picture perspective. We want to get a sense of what is going on in our clients' lives, in the industry that we serve the most, which is SaaS. We've always been focused on SaaS-based companies, so no one wants to hear from me or Matthew. We've done enough talking for the whole rest of the conference. We wanted to bring in the pros here, and we've got a lineup here of pros who can really kind of speak to us about what they're seeing in the space. I'll do a quick intro and then let them each introduce themselves. But great group of panelists who many we've known for many years, and others have come through us through some really important relationships. P-Lou, as we call him, Phillip Lewis, has been a longtime friend of Acuity. He's over at Fulcrum, many of their portfolio companies we've been very fortunate to get a chance to work with. Does a great deal of investing in the SaaS space. So from a venture capital perspective, Philip's going to be incredibly helpful to us in kind of giving his perspective. Chris, I kind of view Chris as one of us a bit. I'm like, right? Really, you've sat in the finance chair before. You come from that, but a few of you asked, like, who's this Maxio? I don't recognize them. And we talked about that is SaaS Optics. And everyone was like, oh, SaaS Optics. It's just through the rebrand with the Chargeify acquisition they've gone through. And Chris and their team at SaaS Optics, now Maxio, has so much good data about what really are the metrics and data points that SaaS companies want. Their tool and platform has been instrumental in that. And we've been big users of that too. So Chris brings a great perspective there. And then Don comes to us through a great friend of ours, Joey Womack, who was a speaker here last year, one of our clients at Goody Nation. And all of us also, everybody here at Acuity, we owe a bit of a debt to Don because Don was the founder of JazzHR. And so anybody who's come into Acuity has come through that hiring platform, really, of JazzHR. That was Don. I'm sure he'll mention that. I hope he does. Was the founder of JazzHR. He's on to some new cool things, but all of us are kind of here in some way, shape, or form because of what Don and his team built back in the day. So great lineup here. Give us a quick intro, Phillip, in your words.
Thanks. Phillip Lewis, partner with Fulcrum Equity Partners, based here in Atlanta, invest in high growth SaaS companies as well as healthcare IT. My wife actually used to work with Acuity. She was a controller with you guys. So she said my job here is to tell you how not to get yelled at by me, essentially, to keep the VC guys happy. And but no, I don't yell nearly as much as she's told me not to. So anyways, look forward to this panel.
You're a good listener there. Chris.
Hey. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So those that might not be familiar with SaaS Optics and Chargeify, the legacy brands, we're a subscription management platform that really encompasses revenue recognition, the invoicing, and all of the SaaS KPIs, layering that right on top of the revenue and really your source of truth there. So what I'm hoping to bring is exactly what was said, perspective of what we're seeing personally as a company in the market, what metrics we're focused on, and then across our 2,000 plus customers, where are they focused, and ultimately, what's the heightened focus that we're seeing recently with everything that you guys are hearing about in the market?
Hey everybody, I'm Don Charlton. I'm the founder of a tech company called JazzHR, as you mentioned. We actually sold the company last year, so if you got hired after April 21st and it was a bad experience, I'm not the guy. I have just over a decade, or more than a decade of experience just dealing with a SaaS-based company. I think what was interesting, my perspective is whenever cloud was a newly formed term and there were tons of opportunities in every core business function to try to build a subscription-based business, my company was one of those companies that kind of got a foothold into SaaS very early. So I look forward to being on this panel and seeing if I can help you folks with whatever you need help with.
Oh, awesome. We're super stoked to have them. Let's jump right into it. What are you seeing or maybe experiencing? Where are SaaS founders, where are they stressed right now? Like what's weighing on them right now? And maybe even, is that the same old stuff they're used to of like venture capitalists breathing down their neck? Or have things changed? I mean, have you seen a lot of change in the past 12 months? I'll let anybody take that who wants to. What's keeping people up at night?
What's keeping you up at night, Chris?
I mean, I think everything that you're hearing in the markets, either on LinkedIn or experiencing with the companies you're working with, is pretty spot on, right? It's the public market SaaS valuations are significantly down over the last 12 months, and that's really caused a reevaluation of the growth mode, right? It's no longer growth at all costs. Let's continue to grow and grow and grow, higher, higher, higher. It's more of how do you grow profitably? And I think that's what's really key. And what we're seeing is some kind of knee-jerk reactions to shift back towards the fundamentals. And I'm actually really excited to return to the fundamentals. I think you guys should be as well. Like Phillip could probably speak to it. What we're seeing is really quick diligence cycles when you're raising or going through an acquisition. And the metrics mattered then, but it was more light scrutiny. And I think now we're seeing much deeper scrutiny on the metrics, deeper understanding of the businesses. But it's still, I think what you're seeing even in the public companies is they're still growing. It's just where that growth is coming from really matters. But that's certainly what we're seeing both for our organization and across the companies that we serve.
Yeah, just to add, as I think about our founders and what's really stressing them out right now, a lot of it has to do with people. It's the hiring, it's finding good people, it's retaining good people, it's how do you manage this hybrid work environment. That is what's really keeping them up and stressing them right now. What benefits do you offer to them to get back into the office? There's a lot there. And a lot of these companies have big investments into real estate and into office space they don't want to get zero out of. The other is the younger people coming up through the organization. Remote worked really good for a year or two. You had a team, they were working, you could hire people, you had your flywheel going, tons of money in the market. Now the money's tightened up a little bit. Now you got to think more about profitable growth. Now you need to really think about these younger, maybe less expensive people. Well, how are they going to learn how to be managers? How are they going to learn how to work with other people when they haven't been around other people for 2 years? So I think that's, as you think about the challenges, I don't have the answer to that. If you do, tell me. I want to invest in that company. But that is a real problem we're hearing from our CEOs.
I think I'll just add, with the exception of the things that occurred because of the pandemic, this is kind of like a cycle. Like I've been through the cycle where money was cheap and growth at all costs and then pull back your purse strings. So we're just kind of going through that cycle. I think, so I think everything they said is spot on. But basically, what we're talking about today, we'll talk about again in 5 to 10 years anyways. So it's just kind of like it's a wheel that just goes around and around.
Yeah, why you've got that, Mike, Don? So you've got more business now. Quicki is one that you're working on. And I'm sure exactly when you launched that or started that. Have you changed the way that you've, based on your experience that you saw at JazzHR, whether it's from a capital formation standpoint or things that you're like, oh, I'm going to do some things differently this time? What's changed now that you're, again, going back and becoming, you've been a serial entrepreneur, but you're launching new ventures? Anything in particular?
Well, I think one thing, just from a personal perspective, whenever you start a second company, especially if the first one had some level of scale, it's weird because you feel confident because you know what you're getting into, but you also feel stressed the hell out because you know what you're getting into, right? It's kind of both. I think, the way that I kind of approach it differently now, especially around SaaS, is, as I mentioned before, there was a time whenever SaaS was very much like maybe the 1920s where there was probably a battle for who was going to make the best ketchup. There were probably a battle for paper clips. Now, I remember back whenever I started, you could look at every core business function, and they're probably, with the exception, like recruiting, ironically, was one of the first SaaS platforms. Like people realized right away you needed something to like manage all the candidates coming in. But marketing, sales, accounting, they're very mature companies that are entrenched. They have the partnerships in place today. So what's been more difficult this time around. I thought I had something in video, but then the freaking pandemic came and every person from 18 to 58 wanted to come with a video startup. It's much harder to come up with a company today that has very clear, defensible differentiation out the gate because there's so much more activity in SaaS that it's almost like you have to really kind of know an industry, have an edge in that industry or an insight where there's a hole in the market. and be able to exploit that. You can't really be naive today and build something on that naivete very easily, especially when you're talking about business apps. And that's one of the, Clubhouse is one thing, but it's another thing to try to figure out how you're going to unseat HubSpot, Salesforce, or Monday.com, and so forth.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Phillip, I want to go back to something you said about people, because it's a little surprising, and I'm trying to maybe reconcile this, because I feel like we've heard in the last 12 months so much about layoffs. Some of our clients have had to go through and make cuts and kind of cut people. So to me, it seems like, oh, shouldn't there be more people on the market? But here you say, no, it's getting harder and harder to find and retain. Is that, am I thinking about that the right way? Or is it just kind of you get the news cycles that hype up like the layoffs as much, and still below all that, the people thing is still the issue? Or I think we kind of thought, wow, there's going to be a lot more tech workers out in the street, but it doesn't sound like, based on what you've observed inside of some of your portfolio companies, that's necessarily the case.
Yeah, I think a lot of these layoffs, and I was talking to a CFO of business we didn't invest in, but a local tech startup, and they had a number of layoffs, and his exact quote, I'm not going to tell you who it was because it's a pretty direct quote, was, yeah, we hired a bunch of shitty people. They lowered the bar for talent. They just needed seats on the bus. They were told to grow at all costs by their VCs, and they just hired people. And you're seeing a lot of those people who probably weren't qualified for those jobs getting laid off. So I actually naively thought, oh, there's a lot of layoffs. Our portfolio companies are going to be able to hire more talent. Just, thought that'd be logical. But no, yeah. The people that are out there are not the A players, not even the B players at these companies. They're the people who weren't performing. They gave a lot of companies, and I'll tell you, a number of our companies did this. It gave you an excuse to do that 10 to 15% riff that you really wanted to do, but you didn't want to be seen in the market as somebody laying off people. Now, all of a sudden, you can do that under the guise of, oh, the economy, we're going to do a one-time layoff. I mean, again, it happens every single time there's a recession. It happens, but I think that's a lot of what you've seen. Interesting.
Okay, that's interesting. I wasn't sure if you were grabbing that, Chris, to add on to it, or...
Yeah, I mean, I think, too, a lot of it is that growth at all costs, companies getting ahead of their skis a little bit. And then you got to keep in mind from a SaaS perspective, with high gross margin businesses like SaaS, really your main expenditures are people, unfortunately, in SaaS platforms. And if you have a people challenge, right, it actually bodes well if you have a workflow automation, regardless of what vertical you're in, to actually perform quite well, right, when you can't find the talent or hire the talent. And then if you are in a position where you have to get back and right-size the metrics, you do unfortunately have to look at people. Our organization has kind of avoided that and said it like that's absolutely at the last resort for a lot of reasons. And I think Philip's point is valid. I think there's also a lot of people that are new hires that get rolled up in those as well, because it's hard to look at your tenured team members and your recent team members. So it's a mixed bag. But I think a lot of companies just got ahead of their skis and were over hiring for growth that they didn't actually see come through the organization. I think advice that you could potentially give to any of your organizations that you're serving that might be looking at that is just operate with a level of transparency. I think that is the hardest aspect, is it's catching a lot of those companies by surprise. The team members don't have clear transparency, not having those hard conversations of what does efficient growth look like. And just having more transparency. I think it bodes well to all the clients that you guys serve, and really having a deep understanding throughout the organization of the financial metrics that you're currently focused on, even if they have changed in the last 6 to 12 months.
So I think I feel bad for those startups who did that. I mean, had they only used JazzHR, they would have only had A and B players the whole way through. It would have been much easier. That's not yet.
I can add to that.
Yeah, please.
It's funny. That's a nice segue, because what I was going to say was, there were 2 quick comments. One, often whenever you have these type of rifts, it affects sort of like the line employees, like the people who don't necessarily manage anybody. But one of the big challenges that no one really talks about too much is it's really hard to build a hierarchical structure where even your VPs, your directors, or anyone who has responsibility for hiring is not only really good at picking the right people, but they're also really good at developing them and turning them into star players, right? Especially, you can't say that, you hired necessarily shitty people. If you're trying to hire BDRs who are 1 to 2 years out of college and only have 2 years of somebody not telling them what to do every single day. But that requires a rock star type of person who understands professional development. So I would give the advice that, investing in professional development and making sure that from the CEO down, professional development is something that people gain as a core competency. It basically, it's not going to eliminate rifts, but it's also going to, it's also going to reduce the number of people that get let go. So in many cases, I would argue before you look at what the problems are with who you're hiring at the bottom, take a look at anybody who makes hiring decisions, because if you're a B+ sales leader and somebody tells you have to hire 65 salespeople, if that salesperson doesn't push back and say, no, I have a different plan, here's how we're going to do this the right way, you're going to run into that anyways, and then most likely the sales guy's gone too, or sales gal, they're gone as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think it's easy to kind of pass the buck on, say, well, whoever hired that person, right? And how often do we think about how are we developing them? Because sometimes those expectations are someone coming in right out of college who is in a BDR role. There does need to be some development there. That's good. That's good counsel, I think. Chris, you've mentioned a few times metrics, and so I'm super curious because when we've worked with y'all when you were at SaaS Optics, we always thought of you as, hey, the way that we're going to really help on RevRec. And so I always think about that as get some real clarity for management teams, for investors on really what the revenue cycle looks like. I'm sure I know that's still part of what Maxio reports on, but are you getting directly from customers or hearing from the market of like, hey, there's some other sets of metrics now that are more important than just kind of figuring out exactly how do we kind of smooth out the chunkiness of some of these contracts and things from a revenue perspective? Anything new that you're hearing from the market that's speaking to like, hey, we need this as part of the product to better manage our SaaS business? Just curious.
Yeah, I don't know if necessarily the high-level metrics have changed. It's the questions that are getting asked about those metrics that's certainly evolved. Right, for SaaS platforms, churn's always top of mind, gross churn, net revenue retention, those type of metrics, because it feeds, 12 months ago, it fed growth, right? It was like, okay, we need to look at our gross churn numbers to understand, how are our customers, where are we churning out to fuel the growth engine. I would say the same metrics matter. We're certainly seeing a lot more of like the Rule of 40 kind of conversations, looking at not just growth, but growth plus, for most SaaS businesses, it's you're basically, if you're not familiar with that metric, I'm sure most of this room is, but for context, you're adding in your, for SaaS business, typically your ARR growth and then your EBITDA margins and looking at that. And the idea is if you're in around 40%, right, you could have negative EBITDA margins, but high growth to really get into best of class. Starting to see more focus around those metrics. I would say what is new, though, is the cohort analysis. And this is something that I think you guys could really assist your clients with. It's not just the high-level, board presentation, top-level metrics. It's going that next layer deeper and understanding, okay, if your churn is X, is it new customers that are driving that churn? Is it your older customer base? Where is the growth actually coming from? And where do you have the most profitable growth? And I think that is what we're seeing really evolve. And that's what my point around more scrutiny on the metrics. It's, okay, great, you're growing at 60%, you have negative EBITDA margins. Where is that growth coming from? It's a very different story if it's your older customers growing versus the customers that you landed a year ago. And so cohort analysis is really important. You mentioned how do we look at it as Maxio and the revenue recognition? Yes, that's important and it's the core business function, but it's capturing all those other data points. What was their ARR when they started? What year did they join? What sales team members were selling that, right? Like one example that I like to use is your best top performing sales rep might not actually be your most profitable sales rep. Like, are those deals churning out at the 12-month mark or whatever your renewal cadence is? So it's those types of metrics that we're seeing evolve in the market. And I actually think that makes the finance function much more valuable to all the other functional areas, right? It's that marketing level insights of, hey, where are we getting the best return on investment of those marketing dollars? So I think that's what we're experiencing for our company directly and what our portfolio companies or the companies that we serve are experiencing as well.
Yeah, I gave these guys an acronym before this. We'll see if any of you guys know it. DROOC. Anyone?
Matthew, do you know that one? I see you walking out. Oh, he doesn't know. He ran out. DROOC.
Don't run out of cash. And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's very true. It's happened. It's the worst call that can possibly be taken by a VC. And it's happened 2 times over the last 15 years. You get a call on a Tuesday, hey, I'm not sure how we're going to fund payroll on Friday. And that happens. And if you want to know the number one most impactful thing you can do for your companies, especially now, is make sure the CEOs really know their cash runway. Truly know what is the AP cycle, what is the AR cycle. We've had companies where you're looking at the financial model and they were baking in a 30-day collection cycle. You look over the last 45, 90, 120 days, those are stretching out, especially right now. So you can't necessarily say historically it was 30. What if it's 90? What does that do to your cash flow cycle? Have those scenarios for your CEOs. They need to know what happens if the big clients don't pay. The client that was going to pay you $450K next month all of a sudden says, hey, I need terms. I can't do that. It's going to have to be stretched out into monthly payments, not quarterly payments. So that's the really number one area is that cash flow forecast right now. Because we're seeing that across our portfolio, frankly, is a lot of enterprise customers are asking for terms, especially in healthcare. If you have anybody that's selling into healthcare, hospitals especially, they are all renegotiating right now. About half of what we do is half our companies are in healthcare. Hospitals are strapped for cash right now. So that is an area to really focus on for any clients that sell into healthcare or sell into hospitals.
Yeah, let's remember that. Remember that. I see Graham in the back, who's been through probably more cycles than most of us. Lots of head nodding. I don't get sore back there from nodding your head, but yes, you've seen it. I know you have. What about, and this good that you still have the mic, but I know Don also does some investing too. If a client right now, if we've got a client of ours who's kind of entering a fundraising cycle, right? What are y'all looking at? I mean, things may not have changed much, but if we've got clients who need to enter a fundraising cycle in the next 12 months, is it, hey, get the fundamentals together, just like it's kind of always been, or are there new things that you are asking for as investors of saying, hey, listen, could be, again, around, we really want to see what this investment's going to do from a runway perspective. We have a number of clients who are in that phase. What should we be helping them think about as they enter the actual fundraising cycle? I know some of this has to do with valuations and things are down, and the exit windows seems like they've really kind of closed down a bit. How should we be trying to help them in the finance chair?
Yeah, it's really interesting because of the now versus next year. I'm starting to see a lot of things out there in the market, especially around dry powder, which is basically how much capital has been raised by funds that hasn't been deployed. It is really, there's a giant backlog right now. It's about $290 billion of venture capital that is sitting on the sidelines that needs to be deployed. When you add in private equity dollars, it's over $1 trillion. There is a lot, and this is from PitchBook. This isn't just, I'm making up, so I can actually source that one for you. So there's a lot of capital. So I'm starting to hear a lot that next year could be a very big bullish year for startups looking to raise venture capital. So I think there's actually a really good opportunity as you think about working with your clients of positioning them for this market of where they can deploy capital to grow, really understanding what their ROI is going to be on new reps, on marketing dollars, helping them tighten up their metrics, especially around conversion ratios, leads, where they're coming from. The tighter they are on knowing what that ROI on the growth dollars are going to get, the higher the multiple they're going to get on on investment.
I don't know, Don, I mean, do you mostly do it at the angel seed level? Are you doing any kind of investment? Yeah.
The 6 figures and under. I'm not ready.
Yeah. So that's super helpful because, I mean, we look at kind of on the professional fund side, right, versus what angel, and we've got some folks in here who do some angel investing. Does the right now what's happening in the market really impact the way that you look at deals? Or like, no, at that level, when you're thinking kind of angel seed level, is it more important not so much about the fundamentals, because maybe if they're that small, they haven't had time to really get the financials together. Is it, I don't know, does the market really impact your decision making when you look at things?
Well, I think kind of said before, everything's just a cycle, like to piggyback on what he just said. For a personal perspective, I think this is a great time to start to get your pitch together because there's a cycle. In recessions, a lot of really great companies get started, right? So this is a good time to have a 12-month horizon to raise in capital. What was your question again? I just wanted to make sure.
Well, just if
my perspective.
Yeah, your
on
perspective when you look at deals and
so,
things.
I mean, so if I were to be hyper personal, what I'm focusing on first are, if you look at angel investing, in some ways it's kind of charity. Like, you gotta like the person, you gotta like the space, and you're making a really high stakes gamble. You're not really, and I don't want to say you're spraying and praying, but you're not really assuming that you're some brilliant genius, right? What you're really doing is you're diversifying your ignorance, right? In many ways. But so my personal focus though is I like to find later stage companies that are doing, 9 figures in revenue, that have created a special purpose vehicle that I can kind of attach onto. So basically there's a smaller number of scenarios where things can go really bad. And if you can get that kind of access, I think from an angel investor perspective, you'll start there. But obviously, the building we're in is because somebody made a bet on for one of the reasons, made a bet on a guy named Tope, who created a company called Calendly, which, for a small check now turned into basically wealth, right? So you kind of have to I kind of want to do both sides, but as a founder, you have to be very careful, because every idea you can imagine making it better, and you start to imagine yourself running it, thinking that it's going to be a big company. So I'm kind of careful when it comes to very, very early stage companies and so forth, because I recognize that in some ways you're paying tuition typically when you get into
That's
that,
a good way to look at
because you don't really know what you're doing.
Totally. Yeah, I think we just saw in the hallway that angel investor walk by who invested in Calendly. I was hoping maybe some of his magic rubbed off on me as he walked by. Just kind of. I'm going to ask 2 more questions here, and then I want to make sure that we've got some questions coming from out here, because we will close it down at 4. Some of these folks have some commitments we need to get them to. So be thinking of questions. I got a few more for them. And I'm glad, Don, you've got the mic. You were introduced to us through, again, our good mutual friend, as I mentioned, Joey Womack, who many of you know Joey. He was on this stage last year. And Phillip, you also know Joey well. Fulcrum has had a great partnership with Goody Nation. And so one of the things I know that Joey spoke about and really challenged from this stage about, that I'm curious where you think things are. It's only a year later. But, Joey's focus is on bringing, into the tech world, so not just SaaS, but tech world in general, how is the landscape looking for people of color, for women who are out there as entrepreneurs and startups? And it was one of the reasons we love working with Joey, because he's taken that very missionally as a focus. Any kind of what are y'all seeing? Are you seeing that we're making progress on that front, in the terms of we see more founders who come from different backgrounds, different non-tech hubs, who are not just, honestly, white guys? Or do we still have a long way to go? What are y'all seeing out there on the front lines? And whoever wants to take this one.
This is that hot seat conversation. I think if I were to be blunt about it, I would say, no, you're not. And the reason, and the evidence is, just look at the numbers. And I like to use an analogy so people can empathize a little bit more. If you look at the NFL, the vast majority of running backs are black. I guarantee you there's 30 white guys in the United States of America that probably are better than most of the starting running backs in the NFL. But because of stereotypes and perceptions, very early on, the black kid, if he's in Pee Wee football and he fumbles a couple times, well, that's normal. That's part of your growth and development and so forth, right? But if a white guy fumbles the ball, well, this is why white guys don't run the football, right? So as a result, you end up having an NFL with mostly African-American running backs. Like, I always make the joke, I would love to see an African-American person, I'm gonna say, fuck off $500 million trying to build the next big thing. Because if you create a situation where the vast majority of capital goes to a homogenous group of people, the vast majority of positive outcomes are gonna be that homogenous group of people. So it's always an unfair comparison, because you have a very small number of black entrepreneurs who are trying to show we can build successful companies. And because we have limited resources, there's a smaller number of us, our outcomes are magnified significantly. And as a result, in my opinion, it creates, like I know when I go out and raise money, when my black face goes up on the screen, everybody in the room, it's almost like the Houston Rockets whenever Yao Ming was up on the screen. No one talks about it, but there's no Asian basketball players that are really good, right? And I was fortunate enough, and I realized I was fortunate, that I actually found people who were willing to look at the business and so forth and invest in me. And it's very hard for me sometimes to understand the other side because I was successful at it. But, you know, to me, the best way to fight that is it's a data-driven industry, venture capital, right? So I always say, like, don't look at the amount of value created. And I would challenge all VCs to put this data out, put a graph that says the total amount of money you've invested in white and Asian males and everybody else, and how much value was created. So the amount of money that white men have been able to burn to find the next big thing is probably way more than all money raised by every single person in every other group combined. And that's going to create what we see here. So that's kind of like I just think that's irrefutable, from my perspective, that's why there's no white running backs in the NFL. Because trust me, if you're a white guy in college and you fumble the ball twice, you're not getting a second chance. Don Charlton, I exited a company, but if I burned $50 million in my next company, I wonder if I would get a third chance, because I think that they would index on the fact that, well, this is why you don't give black guys $50 million. That's kind of my thoughts.
I appreciate this. I mean, this is what I think, this kind of candid conversation is the one that we try to have inside of Acuity. It's why we have Joey Womack on this stage. And I know Joey, as friends of all of us, would appreciate us continuing that conversation and kind of pushing that forward. So I appreciate you being candid about that. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in there. Yeah, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say that. Exactly right. I mean, I love the fact that this is a question that we're being asked and continue to make a topic of conversation. I don't think it's something that you fix overnight. I would say one of the challenges in this opportunity is a lot of SaaS companies hire from other SaaS companies. And so if there's a challenge in that space, right, you have to start and fix somewhere. And what I am encouraged about is all of the initiatives, the fact that it is an ongoing topic of conversation. We're pressing in our organization to see, okay, how do we challenge and change those perceptions of just hiring within the SaaS space in that ecosystem that we know already has this challenge? And how do we look at the next wave of our next wave of managers and leadership and start there and change it? But I don't think it's something that we're going to change overnight. We just have to keep making it a point of conversation. So I love the fact that you're continuing that discussion.
Yeah, and Phillip, I think we got to know Joey through you and through what you've done at Fulcrum with Goody Nation. So yeah, I'd love to hear your...
And I guess I'll just not dispute anything. I'm going to tread very carefully as the white VC on stage. But no, 5 years ago, it's a little bit like Chris said, and Don's right, but 5 years ago I was the chairman of Venture Atlanta, and I looked around at the conference the year before. I was like, this is just a bunch of old white guys. And we got to do something about this. We need to, really invest in diversity. And one of the board members said to me, well, we're just doing that for diversity's sake. I'm like, no, look at Atlanta. There's a ton of entrepreneurs in this city that just aren't here. We need to get better entrepreneurs in the room by expanding the pie of who we're reaching out to. Joey was one of the people, but also Bernie Dixon at Launchpad 2X got more involved with Thai Atlanta and really looked at the whole diversity angle of how do we get more great entrepreneurs and get the best entrepreneurs on stage. And this is sort of to look at the numbers. Just look at Venture Atlanta this year. 2/3 of the entrepreneurs on stage are minority entrepreneurs. 2/3. From basically 1 or 2 out of 30 to 2/3 of 85 entrepreneurs are underrepresented entrepreneurs. So I think there is momentum. There's a ton more that needs to get done. We're not even close to being there, but I do think we are. It's a long game, and I think as long as we continue the dialogue and continue unearthing these great entrepreneurs so that VCs know they're there to invest in, I think it'll, eventually, I hate saying eventually, but just look at our portfolio. We've got a lot more diverse managers in Fund 4. It's, I think, about half of our entrepreneurs are now minorities, whereas Fund 1, none. So it's happening, but not as fast as anyone else would like.
I appreciate you guys taking that question. That's not always an easy one, but I think again it's good for us to talk about. And it goes back to when we kicked this off, at lunchtime today, of why we talked about we have team members from all over the world and globally and how much we love that, but Atlanta is our home and it is our headquarters, and we do see opportunity here in the community that we live in to help bring some of that out there to the rest of the world. So it's one of the reasons why we do love Atlanta, even though we still got a lot to work on here. I'm going to pause. I have another question for these folks, but we've been going, and I want to make sure that y'all out there, if there are questions for the panel, they're coming up. So I think Lisa's got a mic and she's traveling around. Who's got something for the panel? They'll take. I know they'll take anything, whether it's SaaS, tech. Being shy. Yeah. I'll do a repeater.
Curiosity, how do you find the entrepreneurs since they're so new and fresh? How do you even go about finding them to pull them up on a panel?
You're talking like Venture Atlanta? You're talking about Phillips?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk a little bit about how the Venture Atlanta works and selection process works?
Yeah, so it's pretty broad now. So we're in our 15th year. So we've got a pretty good reach out there, but a lot of it is by partnering with other programs and sponsors. So we have a lot of accounting firm sponsors, a lot of investor sponsors, and they go out to their networks and say, hey, this is a conference you should speak at. This is if you're looking for people, if you're looking for talent, if you're looking for money, looking to network, it's a good conference to be at. So we had, I think, 500 or 600, somewhere in there. It's on the website, applications this year for 85 slots. So it gets out there. Joey brings a lot of them to the table. Bernie brings a lot of them to the table. Atlanta Tech Village brings a lot of them to the table. But it's throughout the entire Southeast now, from Texas all the way to the Mid-Atlantic. So it's pretty broad, the reach of the conference. And I think, 1,200 people are going to attend this year?
Yeah,
So.
yeah, it's huge numbers. I'll say, give a quick little history on Acuity. Is we've been involved with Venture Atlanta for, I think, almost all the 15 years as a sponsor. And our role for many of the years was as a coach. So we ran the coaching process. We didn't really work on the selection side, but once they were selected, what we felt very passionate about was helping these entrepreneurs who've been selected present well. Let's give them the best opportunities. So Matthew, got to give a lot of credit to Matthew, really helped them on practice their pitch, work through their decks, because we wanted to make sure that all the folks who got up there on stage just had as many reps as possible so they could feel confident. We felt like we wanted them to be successful individually. We also felt very strongly that what we are doing here in Atlanta is unique and needs to be told more in the tech community. So we also felt like our ability to kind of lean in and help there. And a lot of it actually was on the slide deck in general, but specifically on the financials. We did a lot of work on the financial side of all right, let's take a look at how you're presenting your sources and uses of funds, because we knew that had to be presented in a way that was appealing to have another conversation afterwards with the likes of either angel investors or with venture capitalists. So we have a lot of love for the Venture Atlanta folks. We'll be there this year again representing Acuity. So cool. Other questions? Yeah, Jody.
So piggybacking off of that, Venture Atlanta last year, I met a few people from the West Coast that felt like Atlanta was not competitive in the technology arena. What do you see in the Atlanta area for technology, the expertise, the companies? Is it moving from the West Coast? I thought Atlanta was much more tech involved and savvy than I guess these people thought.
Yeah, I think part of that is a lot of the really outsized exits are driven on the West Coast. I mean, that's just a fact. There's a lot more unicorns that have been created there because there's a lot more wealth out there. There's a lot more funding out there. I think Atlanta is starting to see that. You have Calendly, $5 billion. You have SalesLoft, $2.4 billion. You have OneTrust over $1 billion. So you're starting to see some unicorns here. I think what will be exciting is when the entrepreneurs who were in those companies that were made millionaires on those exits, those employees who become entrepreneurs, they go out and then found their companies, and you can really get a cycle of funding within Atlanta. I mean, those people out there are looking for those billion-dollar exits. Here in Atlanta, and I'm guilty of this at Fulcrum, we've always been very happy with the $200, $300 million exit. We can get money back to our LPs, have good funds, successful. Out there, they're shooting for those billion-dollar exits. And that's why you'd hear that response, because that hasn't been the mentality in the history of Atlanta entrepreneurs.
I would just say fuck what they say, because I mean seriously, like. I mean seriously, they're just biased because they're in an environment where, you know, like if I mean they're lucky, right? Like the idea of building tech company. I mean, we can go back to names no one in this room probably knows, right? The people who founded Hewlett Packard and so forth, like they had a huge first mover advantage in terms of, you know, building an ecosystem around recognizing that you have to build, you know, university-based incubation around talent, knowledge, professors, and so forth, whatever else. I mean, in many ways, we're only a few decades, maybe a decade into having tons of people tech-aware, motivated to do it, the tools to be able to actually build things from the ground up. So all that is somebody coming from the West Coast over here, you know, who's fortunate enough that they happen to live over there, just kind of basically talking down to you. You know, like it's just poor character to kind of say that, in my personal opinion, because guess what? You know, we're trying to build something over here the way we want to. We don't measure ourselves based on the fact that we don't have as many as them, right? So keep your money over there, because I raised money from every place but the West Coast, and we did very fine. So, you know, for me as a founder, that's just a biased kind of thought process. But you know, like fuck them, like that kind of talk doesn't even make no sense.
That's right. Sal's got something to say. Hey, don't forget about, don't sleep on us here in Atlanta. So what else? These are great. See, this is the kind of panels we want here to get into it. What else y'all got? We got a couple more minutes left, and then we're going to let them bounce out. What? Okay. If you don't, I'm going to ask them one last one. Any others? And some of you may have touched on this, and I mentioned this to y'all. I wanted to make sure that we kind of left everybody in this room with some just thoughts, practical of these are the accounting teams right here, the CFOs, the controllers, some of the bookkeeping team, probably even some tax folks in here. These are the financial teams, right, that are helping support these SaaS founders. What would you say is just a piece of advice about how, specifically speaking into the accounting financial teams, we can be helping these founders the most? Yeah, Don, go ahead, man.
Just very quickly, every one of you is sitting down in your chair, and you know how much you know and don't know about what this guy's thinking about for how a company has to tell their story, understand modern ways that VCs are looking at metrics, like what metrics are kind of in fashion for how people are trying to decide, is this a business that generates a lot of revenue, or is this a business that's going to generate a lot of revenue and then burn out at some point? You know how much of that you know. You know how much time you spend talking to investors and learning how they are looking at companies and how they are expecting the story to be told. So if you're not a fucking wizard at that, then you're doing a disservice. Because as a founder, when you hire a CFO, you're hoping that your CFO is a year ahead of you, looking at these are things that are happening internally in the business. These are things that are happening externally in terms of how valuations are appearing and so forth, and how, you know, fundraising, what challenge we're going to have fundraising. So in many ways, it's kind of an opportunity for yourself to build up some skills where maybe if you step out someday and start your own company, you'd be a pretty decent either founder who has an understanding of the finances of a business, or maybe you can step over and be a director of finance or a CFO. CFO is kind of hard to start out from zero, but to be like a director of finance or somebody in an early stage company that can't afford a CFO, you have an opportunity to build those skills in here right now, but you have to have the discipline to understand that you have to be way ahead, because trust me, a CEO is a person who has tons of confidence and tons of insecurity, and in many cases doesn't know shit. So your job is to tap into that person who's going to be 10 years older than you and try to be that CFO for your company, because that's going to be skills that extend way beyond being an outsourced CFO. It's something that you can actually apply in your own personal life over time, and your CEO will thank you for that.
That's awesome. I'll just, real quick on that, I love that Don said that, because when I've talked to y'all about this, when I talk to others, and they say, what does the CFO do? And the predominant thing I always remind them is the difference between other levels is it's got to be future state. It's got to be forward looking. And so that's the way that I think, again, as Don mentioned, someone's got to be looking way, way out the front window, right? Planning things out, because our clients need that desperately. Love that you said that. Chris, what you got?
probably a couple things, real tactical, just kind of building on what Phillip was talking about of don't run out of cash. I mean, just on a practical nature, accounts receivable is really important. I mean, looking at the health of that and understanding what that looks like. I think a lot of times early stage companies, it's, well, hey, I'm hitting my sales numbers, I'm hitting my bookings numbers, cash shouldn't be a problem. It is. So that would be the first thing. I would say a couple other things. I think so many businesses now are looking at the next fundraise as their next milestone, right? Fundraising is a privilege, in my view. You got to build a really sound business, and a fundraise allows you to accelerate that growth. It's not just, hey, I'm raising capital and then I'm going to raise capital again, right? Like, no, in between, you really need to be building a strong fundamental business where capital is a privilege to go faster, but it could sustain on its own. That's just my perspective. And then the third thing, because we talked about like the recruiting environment, training. I mean, I love AcuityCon. Like, this is great. Investing and encouraging CEOs and the finance team to fund and invest in the team, get the teams together, that pays dividends. It's really hard ROI to track, right? It's hard to calculate it, but certainly don't skimp there. And I think that's, I was kind of thinking and reflecting on the comment of West Coast versus Atlanta-based SaaS company. I mean, what does that mean now? With a remote workforce, what's your definition of where the company is based? Where the headquarters is, where the founder is, most of the remote teams, but not investing in your team members and getting them together, I think that is an area where you got to prioritize in any 23 planning kind of exercise. So kind of three things I would pass on.
Super helpful. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I'll just give you one thing here, because you asked for it to be pretty kind of tactical, is the one area, or just not the one area that can really kill an investment is when a CEO does not know their numbers, or when the numbers keep changing. The most important thing the people in this room can do to add value to their clients during a fundraise are make sure their numbers are solid and the CEO knows those numbers down pat. Create a cheat sheet for them. Make sure they know all of their key metrics, their CACs, their LTVs, their quarterly bookings. They have that spreadsheet down. And follow up with me. We have a spreadsheet we use to look at. I'm happy to share it with any of you. Kenji can give you my contact information. Put that together for them. Make sure they know it and have it on hand, and those numbers are solid. Because when our analysts or any of the analysts at these companies start digging their numbers, they're going to find errors. That's their whole job, is to find errors. Make sure they aren't there.
Easy, right? Easy. That is incredibly helpful. Y'all, please give it up for this great panel. So happy to have y'all here, guys. Thank you so much. All right, thanks, y'all. You're off the hook now.